Hey guys, welcome to my first ever YouTube video. I'm really excited to start this. I've been meaning to start this for a while now, but I haven't been able to due to my schedules. But I'm going to be up and running now. So, I wanted to make this video as an introduction as well as my first review video. Basically, this channel will be dedicated to movie reviews as well as game reviews, and in the future, when I have better equipment, Let's Plays. So for now, I haven't decided if the Let's Plays are going to be on a separate channel or if they're going to be on this channel altogether. More than likely, it'll be altogether on the same channel to make things easier for everyone. Without further ado, though, I want to go ahead and get started on my very first review. And the review I want to do today is a movie that everybody has seen, hopefully by now, and it is going to be Captain America: Civil War. My next review will probably be on Batman vs. Superman, more than likely, and in that video, I'm going to compare the two. Now, starting off with Captain America: Civil War. Everyone's by now seen the very first Avengers movie, and everyone's also seen Avengers: Age of Ultron. This movie, of course, takes place after Age of Ultron. Now, here in Civil War, we see the Avengers doing their thing. So far, no Thor or no Hulk in this movie, unfortunately. I think it would have really been cool to see which sides they would have picked, but it is what it is. So, in this movie, again, we see the Avengers doing their thing, and we see Tony giving a speech about this new technology he comes out with. Really great technology, by the way. And a woman comes up to him after he gives a speech to some MIT students, to a group of MIT students, and approves all of their projects. A woman comes up to him, and they have a little chat, and it turns out that her son died in Sokovia in Age of Ultron, as the Avengers were trying to figure out how to stop that giant city from becoming a meteor that could destroy the world once it got high enough. Now, with that, Tony feels bad. That starts to put into his mind the idea that we've seen from the comics of the Superhero Registration Act. Of course, in this movie, it's called the Sokovia Accords. Now, while that's going on, I'm assuming while that's going on, Cap and his Secret Avengers team are, I want to call them Secret Avengers, but they're just regular Avengers, so excuse me on that. Cap and his Avengers team are on their own mission to stop a guy named Crossbones from stealing a certain chemical bioweapon, which they succeed in. And turns out Crossbones is a character from Winter Soldier that apparently hates Cap now and wants to kill him, so decides to do a suicide bombing and to take Cap with him. Scarlet Witch goes ahead and encases the guy and sends him up into the air so the explosion won't hurt anybody on the ground, but she doesn't quite send him high enough, and the explosion causes the building next to him to explode and injures many more people. And with that is also another reason for the Sokovia Accords to come into play. Now, anybody who's seen this movie or is just getting into superheroes was probably wondering, what are the Sokovia Accords? The Sokovia Accords are basically the movie's version of the Superhero Registration Act. Basically, the superheroes have to either sign it and register, and they will no longer be a private organization. They will be working under the government, under S.H.I.E.L.D. per se, and they will be paid by the government, of course, and basically get government employees. The only thing is of course they have to give up their secret identities. They have to have to answer to a panel who will decide where to send them, what missions they go on, if they even go on those missions, things like that. Now, again, General Ross, or Secretary of Defense Ross, as I should say, but of course he'll still keep his title as General. He is the one that brings the Sokovia Accords to the Avengers, and basically tells them what's going on, and basically he is on the side of you need to sign, even though I think that's a bit hypocritical of him, considering the fact that he's the one that created the abomination in the Incredible Hulk that led to the destruction and many deaths of people. But that's a whole nother thing. So then, again, General Ross is explaining the situation to the Avengers, and this is when we really see Tony and Cap's budding of ideals, per se. And we saw it in the very first Avengers movie, when Cap and Tony had that big man in suit of armor talk. And we saw it again in Age of Ultron when they have another little talk and Cap rips that log in half with his bare hands. But we really see it come to manifest here in Civil War, and I think that those two movies have been building up to this, and it's actually really cool to see Civil War play out in a real life scenario, per se, so to say. And anyway, again, we see Cap and Tony's ideals come into play and butt heads, as Tony feels like that everyone should be held accountable and everyone should sign. And of course, Cap feels that no, everybody has a responsibility and a freedom. Everybody has a freedom to not sign. And if they sign, they're basically signing away their choice. And of course, certain questions arise, such as, and Cap asks them, what if this panel sends us somewhere we don't need to go? Or what if there's somewhere we need to go and they don't let us? He said, these panels are filled with people with agendas, and agendas change. And for those of you wondering, I'm going to go ahead and get it right out the way. I am Team Cap. I stand with Team Captain America, not only because he's one of my favorite heroes, but because I feel he is right on this issue in a real world sense. If you feel differently, that is perfectly fine. If you're Team Iron Man, perfectly fine. Getting back onto track though, the next thing we know, while everyone is debating whether to sign the Sokovia Accord or not, the next thing we see is Cap get a text from someone, an unknown number, saying someone dies and someone's passed on in their sleep. And I'm pretty sure, right as you see it, because it says she's passed on, I'm pretty sure everybody, as soon as they saw that, knows who she is. And it turns out it is Agent Peggy Carter. And it is a very sad death, and I was really, really hoping that we would get to see more of her in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and not just in, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or, even though she hasn't been on there, but, more episodes of Agent Peggy Carter, which, by the way, was unfortunately canceled. To be honest, I never saw the show, but I heard it was really good, from certain people. Anyway, this upsets Cap, obviously, as Peggy was one of not only his greatest friends, but one of his first lovers, to say. And to see her pass away, obviously upsets Cap. But at the funeral, turns out her niece, Sharon Carter, who we all know from the comics, speaks. And she gives the famous when the world tells you to move, you say no, you move speech. And I think that's awesome. I really wanted Cap to say it. Especially, I wanted him to say it to Tony. Spider-Man is in this movie, but unfortunately, Spider-Man didn't change from Team Iron Man to Team Cap. He stayed Team Iron Man the entire time, which is cool. You know, that's how they wanted to go with this movie, so that's how it is. But again, I wanted Cap to say this speech, but it is what it is. She gave a great speech, great eulogy, and afterwards her and Cap talk for a little bit. And obviously you can already see kind of a romance going on there. Anyway, after that, it turns out that Black Widow is going to the signing of the Sokovia Accords. And who do we meet? We get to meet King T'Chaka and T'Challa, Prince T'Challa at the time, of Wakanda, aka Black Panther. Black Panther is an amazing character in the comics, and I was actually really excited to see him in this movie, and I can't wait to see him in his own movie, which, if I remember correctly, comes out in either next year, 2017, or 2018. Now then, we see Black Panther and Black Widow have a little conversation, and then we see his father, King T'Chaka, come in. And his father is basically the main speaker of this event. And as he's talking, Prince T'Challa looks out the window and sees men around a truck, and then the men start running away from the truck for some reason. And then he yells at everyone to get down because he knows something's up, and boom. Big old explosion happens, killing King T'Chaka, unfortunately, and of course T'Challa is upset. Now, after everything's said and done, the news say that it was the Winter Soldier, or Bucky Barnes, as we all know. Turns out it wasn't him, but everybody thinks that he did it. And so Bucky is now a majorly wanted man, not only for his past assassinations, but for this now. Even though he didn't do it. We see Cap and Falcon see the news, and we see that Cap now has to go after Bucky before anybody else does. And Black Panther, of course, is going to go after Bucky because his father is now dead and he feels Bucky is responsible. So Cap goes after Bucky, finds him, and it seems at first that Bucky doesn't quite know who he is, but Cap knows that he's kind of lying. Anyway, awesome fight scene ensues, and an awesome chase scene as well. Black Panther catches up with Bucky as well, and they start to fight, and then again a big chase scene ensues, and the chase scene ends with Black Panther, Cap, and Bucky facing off at each other in the middle of a kind of a broken highway, and War Machine comes in and holds repulsor blasts to both of them and tells Cap, "Congratulations, Cap, you're a criminal." And so the CIA, I believe it is, takes everyone in. Now, of course, King T'Challa now, aka Black Panther, is more than likely given diplomatic immunity as he's taken to an office for a cell, and Cap and Falcon are taken into custody, as is Bucky. Now, we see that the man behind all this is Helmut Zemo, aka the son of the previous Zemo. I can't remember his name at the moment. It starts with B. Anyway, we see Helmut Zemo here as basically the main villain of this story, and he's upset because his family died in Sokovia, and obviously he wants revenge. Well, this whole time he devises a plan to pit the Avengers against each other, and he steals the book that was used to brainwash Bucky, and that has the code words, his code words to unleash the sleeper agent within him, so to speak. And so we see that Bucky is supposed to be interrogated by a psychiatrist, and we see Helmut Zemo come in, and after a few words, it turns out Helmut Zemo has built an EMP device and sent it to a power station that would once they set it off, once it arrives there, it goes off and shuts down the power to their vicinity. And so then he takes his chance to brainwash Bucky, which he succeeds in. And Cap and Falcon go to try and help Bucky, and it's too late. Bucky's brainwashed, doesn't know who they are. All he knows is that, he's given orders. He's become the Winter Soldier again. And so, another fight scene ensues, a great fight scene, I might add. Especially with Iron Man, because Iron Man doesn't have... This is the one time Iron Man doesn't have a suit, but you kind of see his skill here. In the sense of Bucky has a gun, and he goes to point it at Iron Man, and you see, I'm pretty sure most people have seen the preview, but Iron Man grabs a gun, and Bucky tries to move in, and they toss around for a little bit, and finally, Iron Man has one glove of armor, and Bucky goes and raises it, and Iron Man puts his hand in front of the barrel, and Bucky fires, and of course the armor stops the bullet. I thought it was pretty cool. That scene was awesome. Other than that, Bucky tries to get away by a helicopter, and Cap stops him. Bucky's knocked out by the helicopter falling into water and just banging his head, so he's knocked out. Cap takes him into hiding, and now everyone's looking for Bucky. Everyone's trying to find out where he is, where he might have gone. Basically, he's more of a wanted fugitive now. And so we see Cap and Falcon talk to Bucky, and Bucky knows that what happened wasn't his fault, and Bucky knows that saying the words will get him to do whatever that they want him to do. And so Bucky tells them, lets Cap know that he's not the only Winter Soldier. It turns out that there are 5 more Winter Soldiers, and that they all have all their limbs. None of them have mechanical limbs like Bucky does, but they're essentially better than Bucky, because we see a flashback scene where Bucky is fighting with one of them, sparring, and he basically beats Bucky. And so, in a sense, it's kind of showing that these other 5 Winter Soldiers, are better than Bucky. And because we find out that Bucky is the one that caused Iron Man's parents' death. It wasn't just a car accident, Bucky killed them. And we see Bucky take something out of a suitcase that looks like Super Soldier formula. It's blue. It looks like Super Soldier formula. Whether it is or not, I can't say. I do not know. But if it is, then essentially it's been lost. Now then, if it was Super Soldier's formula, I think it's interesting considering the fact that the last time we saw Super Soldier formula was in the very first Captain America movie, the first Avenger, where he's chasing the guy and the guy drops it and it breaks and it's just all over the ground. Anyway, well, after Bucky tells him that, Cap comes up with a plan to try and stop this Zemo guy, because Cap's figured out that there was something wrong with that psychiatrist, and they go to find out what was going on. And Cap gets his own team together, and Cap's team consists of Captain America, Falcon, Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, and Ant-Man. And then, of course, Tony has his own team. Tony has his own team that sides with signing the Sokovia Accords, which is Iron Man, obviously, Black Widow, Black Panther, Spider-Man, and Vision. And both teams are really great, and both teams have their advantages and disadvantages. And as you might have heard me say, Spider-Man was in this movie as well as Black Panther. And on that note, I think it's really cool that Spider-Man was in this movie. Spider-Man is an awesome superhero, and it's really interesting and really refreshing to see that Spider-Man is back at Marvel. For now, Marvel and Sony had a little agreement to have Spider-Man in that universe, and again, I think it's really great. Anyway, so Tony recruits Spider-Man, Peter Parker, for his cause, and we see at the airport that Cap and Bucky and his team are trying to find, transportation to suburbia, or not suburbia, I'm sorry, but to Russia, basically, to stop Zemo. And we see Cap Iron Man shut down the airport, and we see Iron Man's team come out, and we see Cap's team come out, and everyone is suited up, and we know that there's going to be a fight. And we've seen a little bit in the previews, but this fight is actually really good. It really was choreographed well, and everyone was just great at acting. And we see the two sides go up against each other, and basically they have turned on each other. And everyone's just fighting. Black Panther's fighting, Hawkeye's fighting, and we see one of the greatest comic book scenes come to life. We see Ant-Man get on one of Hawkeye's arrows, and Hawkeye shoots him. And it's really awesome. It's really cool. I actually have that comic myself, and I've read it many times. It is a great comic. Now, throughout this entire movie, there's great dialogue, and there's actually great jokes. Because obviously you have to have some type of comedy relief, especially amidst all the drama that's happening. And one of the greatest jokes in this movie, in my opinion, is again, Hawkeye fires Ant-Man, and he lands on Iron Man and gets inside his suit, and he starts disabling Iron Man's weapon system. And Friday, Iron Man's new AI system for his suit, because as we all know, Jarvis was used to create Vision in Age of Ultron. Friday lets him know that this weapon system is going off, and Tony goes, "What is that?" And Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, is like, "Oh, you're definitely gonna have to take this to the shop." And Iron Man goes, "Who is that?" And he says, "It's your conscience. We haven't spoken in a while." And I'm sorry, but it's just one of my favorite jokes in the entire movie. Again, this movie has great dialogue. Anyway, going on, long story short, after the fight is over, the Cap and Bucky find a plane to use to go to get to their destination. Unfortunately, everybody else has to fall back and be taken prisoner for them to make their escape. Kind of a cut off a pinky to save the rest of the body, if you will. And so we see later on in the movie, after Cap and Bucky start to take their plane and go to their destination, we see Iron Man visit the underwater prison that is used to contain the superheroes that did not sign the Hero Registration Act and are basically acting outside the law, if you will, at this point. And it's really interesting to see this prison because it's still a high-tech prison. It's underwater, obviously, but in the comics, the prison is made in the zero realm, if you will, and it was made by Reed Richards, Iron Man, Hank Pym. And in this movie, it's an underwater prison. Obviously, Fox still has the rights to Fantastic Four, and so it's understandable why they couldn't use Mr. Fantastic to help build a zero realm prison. And again, there wasn't, even though in the comics basically every hero and some villains are contained in this contained in the prison, and they're part of it. In the movie, it's just the heroes, or the main heroes that we've known so far. And again, we see Cap's team in the prison, and they're being held because they're prisoners. And of course, we see Secretary Ross there overlooking the prison, and Iron Man's talking to some of them, and he finally gets to Falcon, and he asks if Falcon knows where Cap went, and of course Falcon does, but Falcon makes him an ultimatum because it turns out that Tony figured out that the psychiatrist that was supposed to interrogate Barnes wasn't the psychiatrist that came to interrogate Barnes. Basically found out that Zemo was the guy behind it. And so Tony goes to the prison, asks Falcon where he's going. Falcon tells him, but tells him he has to go alone and as a friend. And so we see Iron Man get back into his helicopter and start to get into his Iron Man suit and take off. And we see that he's followed by Black Panther. Now, we see Zemo, but by this point, we've seen Zemo already get into the establishment, and he's found Mission Report December 16th, 1991, which is the only thing that he's been looking for this entire time. Bucky just told him where it was when he brainwashed Bucky. And so then we see Zemo go into the containment chamber, if you will, where the rest of the Winter Soldiers are being held under stasis. Now, we see Cap and Bucky land, and they're geared up, ready to go, and ready to stop these guys. And then we see, probably about 2 minutes after they've come into the establishment, we see the door being forced open by Iron Man, and basically it's a truce at this point. Iron Man isn't going to take them in because he basically flat out tells them, maybe your story isn't so crazy after all. And so we see Iron Man, Cap, and Bucky, here. And of course, again, they're followed by Black Panther, who's watching them very closely. And we see them go into the same containment chamber where the rest of the Winter Soldiers are, ready to stop them if they're awake. And we hear Zemo's voice come on the other line, come on the intercom, and we hear him give a little speech. And it turns out that he's killed the rest of the Winter Soldiers. And we're wondering, by this point, we're wondering, why did he kill all those Winter Soldiers? You know, he could have used them to take down the Avengers if you're wanting to take down the Avengers. But he uses something even more devious to take down the Avengers, and that is Mission Report December 16th, 1991. That is the day that Tony's parents were killed by Bucky. And so the footage has always been there because there was a camera that caught the entire thing, and Zemo plays it, and everyone watches it, and of course it affects Tony really, really hard. And Tony gets pissed, and he doesn't care if Bucky was being mind controlled at the time, which he was. But he doesn't care if Bucky was being mind controlled at the time or not. He is pissed. And so another fight ensues. He fights Cap because Cap knew all along and didn't tell him. And so another fight ensues, and Zemo kind of makes his escape, and just to outside. And during the fight, we see Bucky try to grab onto Iron Man's mini arc reactor, to basically rip it out and power him down. And we see Iron Man use his chest repulsor ray to blast him off, and Bucky no longer has an arm. Bucky's arm is gone now. And so Tony and Cap are still fighting, and Cap's trying to keep Tony from killing Bucky. And in this fight scene, we see one of the greatest images of comic book history. Again, this movie takes many great images and dialogue from the actual Civil War comic itself. And in this next scene, we see one of the greatest images of Civil War is Tony shooting his hand repulsors at Cap, and Cap holding up his shield to deflect those blasters, and they're just, almost face to face when they're doing it. And it's a great image. It's made even better by the effects, great special effects. And we see Zemo listening to the last message that his wife ever left him for the last time. And then he deletes it as Black Panther comes up behind him. And him and Black Panther have a kind of talk, and Zemo explains what happened to his family, and we finally figure out, this is why he did it. And we see Zemo basically tell him, we also know why Zemo didn't use the super soldiers, or the other Winter Soldiers, if you will. And it's because he said an empire taken down by enemies can rise again, but an empire that takes itself down is gone. Basically saying that he could have used the Winter Soldiers to help take down the Avengers, but the Avengers would have just came back. It's better that he used the Avengers against themselves and had the Avengers fight amongst themselves. And it basically worked, because during his talking, we see Cap and Iron Man are still fighting, and Cap is just at this point beating the crap out of Iron Man. And finally, Black Panther says, vengeance has consumed you. It's consumed them. I'm done letting it consume me. Basically saying that vengeance has consumed Zemo because of his family's death. Vengeance has consumed the Avengers, due to them, Tony's parents dying and wanting revenge, and Cap wanting to protect his friend. And Black Panther wanted revenge too. He wanted vengeance for his father's death, but he said he's done letting it consume him. So Black Panther receives this clause, and he tells Zemo that justice will be served to him. And Zemo says, "Tell that to the dead," and tries to shoot himself because we see he has a gun. Well, Black Panther isn't having that, and he blocks the bullet because his suit is basically armor, and he gets Zemo in a chokehold and holds him there and tells him the living aren't done with you yet. And so after that, we see Tony and Cap still fighting a little bit, and at this point, Tony's finally had enough of Cap beating him up, and Friday lets him know that he's not going to beat Cap hand to hand combat. And so we see Tony use his suit to memorize Cap's fight patterns, and so then Tony devises a defense. And Tony beats Cap a little bit, but then Cap gets the upper hand. All in all, Cap basically kind of wins the fight. He could have killed Tony. He rips off Tony's mask and grabs his shield and goes to slam it down, but he just slams it down into Tony's chest reactor. And so we see Tony pick up Bucky and start to go, and Tony tells him, "That shield's not yours. You don't deserve that shield. My father made that shield." And so we see Cap drop his shield. And so with that, we're kind of left wondering, hey, what's going to happen now? Because he's still Captain America, but is he going to get a new shield? Is he going to, is Tony going to keep that shield and give it back to him? What's going to happen? Is he no longer Captain America? So that one scene raises a lot of questions. And we see Tony and Cap both beaten up. Cap leaves. Tony leaves. And we see Tony basically explaining the situation to everyone. And we see that everyone is basically not hating each other, but going their own separate ways. And finally, at the end of the movie, we see that Steve sends Tony a dummy phone and gives him a letter. The letter basically says that Steve is sorry for holding the for holding the information against Tony and not telling him right away that Bucky killed his parents. And Steve is also sorry that neither of them could agree on the accords. But Cap tells Tony that if they ever need him, he'll be there. And then at that point, while the letter is being read, we see Cap break out his team from the prison. So there is a secret Avengers now. And there's the regular Avengers, and then there's the secret Avengers. And the post-credit scenes, we see Bucky being put back on ice because Bucky believes it's the best thing, since anybody who says those words is basically in control of him and can control him. So Bucky goes back under ice, and they're on Wakanda. It turns out Black Panther helped him and took him to Wakanda. And so it's really cool, it's really interesting, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna see more of Wakanda in these movies, especially considering the fact that Infinity War is coming out, hopefully in 2018 and 2019, parts 1 and 2. And the next post-credit scene, yes, there is two. The next post-credit scene is Spider-Man, and he receives a basically light wristwatch from Tony Stark. And that wristwatch light that has his Spider-Man mask symbol is basically a reference to Spider-Man comics, and Spider-Man actually had a light on his belt, though, that he would push, and it would shine that mask on the criminals, and criminals would be afraid. Kind of like a portable bat signal, if you will. Anyway, that's the second post-credit scene. And that, in essence, is Civil War. That's what happens in Civil War. Now, all in all, I think this movie is absolutely fantastic. Marvel has done a great job with their cinematic universe, and Marvel has done a great job with making these movies, and with directors. Joss Whedon was a great director, always will be a great writer and director. And the Russo brothers did great with this movie. They really did. The effects were great. The choreography was great. The chemistry behind all the characters was actually, and between the actors, was actually really, really good. Obviously, these guys have been working with Avengers, for a while, and even some of them have been working closer together, for a long time, with each individual superhero movie, and then of course with the Avengers movies all together. And so, just the chemistry is just great. And again, if I had to rate this movie, it would be a solid. I'm not giving it anything less than an 8 out of 10. No movie's perfect, but if I had to rate this movie on, pure, on a 1 to 10 level, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, I would say solid 9 out of 10. I'm not giving it anything less than an 8 out of 10, because this movie honestly doesn't deserve anything less than that. It raises even more questions. We really didn't see Hydra in this movie per se. We didn't see them still at work. We didn't see, like in Ant-Man, when we see that guy steal the pin particles to use. Nothing like that. We don't see anybody say "Hail Hydra" or anything like that in this movie. So, we know Hydra's still at work, but at the same time, nothing in this movie pointed to that. Then again, I can understand that, because again, this movie wasn't really about Hydra. But this movie raises lots of questions, not only for the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but also kind of raises some real life situations, such as, if this were a real life situation, if there really were superheroes, in the world, would you stand on Team Cap or Team Iron Man? Would you be for superhero registration, or would you be against superhero registration? It raises a lot of questions, and I think that's important for a movie to do. I think it really is important for a movie to raise a lot of questions for the viewers. Again, all in all, it's a great movie. Now, to end this video, because I think this video has gone on long enough, to end this video, I'll go ahead and say that my next video, again, will be on Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. That video will be released sometime next week, and I'm really looking forward to it. That is something I didn't tell you guys at the very beginning of the video, is I will be doing videos once to twice weekly. And again, in the future, when I have better equipment, I will be doing Let's Plays. I'm actually hoping to get a PS4 here pretty soon. I know I'm a little bit late on that, but you know, it is what it is. Alright guys, until next time, y'all have a good day.